Yeah, all right. Hey, what's going on? I'm glad you're here. If you don't know me, my name's Adam Scott. I'm the head GM and designer of RPG Club. If you want to know what we're about, go ahead, click the link in our bio. But this whole thing started in a bar 5 years ago when we were trying to solve the problem of why did no one show up to game night. And since then, we've run 17,000 sessions, and it's now my full-time job. So I'm here today to answer a question that somebody asked me about how do I tell effective stories? Like, where did I learn? How does that work? And what do I do? So I want to try to answer that for you. And here's a couple of the things you need to know about me. I was a high school teacher for 15 years. I taught history, I taught economics, finance. And one of the really important things that I found when teaching young people about a bunch of old dead stuff from the past, even though I found it really personally interesting, is that there needs to be, for me, some kind of narrative so that students or young people can help connect with whatever I was talking about. I found that the exact same thing applies to a Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop role playing game, that players need to have some type of coherent narrative when things are happening. Otherwise, if we just set up a blank slate with here is a bunch of places you can go and things you can do without any narrative or context or tension, it just leaves players feeling kind of at a loss. I know some people like that style of game. That's fine. That's not what I do. So, what I did when I was teaching, and I want to set this up with some context because this is how I learned how to tell stories effectively, is whenever I was teaching, I did my best to try to help students understand the motivations of whoever was in the story. And the best example I have of this is a very contentious topic from my US history class, which is the topic of understanding slavery and why did slavery exist? What's going on? How does it work? And how do we understand it besides just immediately saying, oh, this is good or this is bad? Obviously, students come to that space with a preconceived notion, I think all of us do, that slavery is not a good thing. And if we stop there, that limits the understanding of what's going on in the story. So hold on, why am I talking about this and not D&D? Because when we tell stories in a role-playing space, if we just set up the dynamic of good versus evil, black and white, sometimes that works, and other times it doesn't leave space for us to dig into what's motivating the characters in the story, what's motivating the bad guy in the story, and how do the good guys or the party's motivations drive their action in connection with the bad guy's motivation, and how do they come into conflict. So here is the thing that really helped for me is I tried to show in class, whether it was slavery or whatever other topic in US history that was maybe less contentious, I tried to show the internal and external motivations of different groups that were in society from many different perspectives. So kids in class, regardless of who they were, could understand more of the dynamic of what was happening. The same thing is what we can do as dungeon masters or storytellers is choose to select items that reveal information about the motivation of what the heck's going on in the game. Is the Dark Lord controlling someone in the town that is actually related to them in some way, and they're trying to exert some kind of weird family control? I mean, I don't know. Whatever the motivation is, the more we can see glimpses of that, the more it creates a really engaging storytelling experience, and it can create a connection of understanding that makes players want to find out more and want to do more things. Because the question I get a lot is, how do you make stories more immersive? How do you make them more engaging? And I've found through my teaching and through my storytelling that when, I guess humanize might not be the right word for Dungeons and Dragons, but when you create a sense of at least understanding why the bad guy is doing what they're doing, the players then have more context for their actions and actually can get more into the story and understand it even more. And it may be more fulfilling for them going through the process of uncovering of that story. So here are a couple things to what tools can you use? Here's some things to think about as a GM. Consider the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, internal and external motivation of different characters that you're controlling, whether it's the bad guy or it's just NPCs. That helps players have more context for what's going on. Other things to consider is, are there any moral dilemmas that these NPCs and bad guys are facing on their own? Like, some of the most interesting villains in storytelling, from my point of view, have a ton of conflict. I mean, look at Darth Vader. Darth Vader is a tragic figure and a sad character, like a really sad character in Star Wars, because as we've learned throughout Star Wars, there's a whole lot of motivation that Darth Vader has. There's a story of loss. There's a story of sadness. There's, his mom dies, and then all of a sudden his kids are taken from him. Like, Darth Vader is pathetic. which like humanizes Darth Vader a whole lot more and makes him, at least from my point of view, that much more interesting as a villain. So other things you can do, consider how you can make a character, an NPC or a bad guy, relatable, even if they're the bad guy. Little personal characteristics, little things they do, or beverages they like, or maybe they have a little, like maybe they're nice to animals. It can create more understanding for the players as to why people in that space are doing what they're doing. Excuse me. So I would encourage you to look at this to set up your storytelling dynamic, as opposed to just having cliche objectives, such as the bad guy wants to take over the world. Why? Because they're the bad guy. That may work sometimes. However, if you're trying to create an environment where players stay engaged in the longer narrative, and let's connect it back to when I taught history, I had kids for a year and I had to get them coming back to class enthusiastic to learn about, well, what's next with US history. I had to teach them about the Whig Party, which I think is really interesting, but kids don't care about. But we would get into the motivations of, well, what kind of lifestyle do these people live? What kind of financial goals do they have? What kind of power systems are they interested in? How would they win in certain situations and benefit themselves? And were they driven by family? Were they driven by society? What were their values? That same approach works when telling role-playing stories. The cool thing is, as a dungeon master, as a game master, we get to select those motivations, those forces that drive the action. And when I would propose for you at home, when you have those clarified in your game world as to what your characters are actually doing and why, instead of just some nebulous, oh, they're bad guys, it's actually going to make a whole lot more positive impact. Well, a couple more bonus points here in a second. If you're interested in what we're doing in terms of how RPG Club has run 17,000 professional games, we're building community. Our average game time has met, I think, now for 60 weeks ongoing every week, which is really cool and players love it. Go ahead and check the link in our bio. We've got our website, platform, all kinds of good stuff. We'd love to help you out. I would also encourage, as a bonus point, and this is, I don't know if it's contentious or not. I don't really care. I've found that good stories happen when emotions are involved. And I know that session zeros are really important. I know that we don't want to put people in traumatic situations where we're just hammering away on really sensitive topics. Obviously, that's not a good idea. However, and there's something to be said for somebody experiencing an emotion that allows them to feel what's going on in the story. And a lot of that will happen through gameplay, but sometimes it can happen through our selections as a dungeon master, our selections as to what we put in front of characters. And we have to remember that as dungeon masters, we are making active choices to present things to players. Just like when I was a history teacher, there was a big responsibility. I was presenting, I had all of US history to choose from. I had to choose what to present. So I wanted to keep a coherent narrative so kids were interested, they were engaged. I wanted to present motivations. I wanted to present as much detail so that they could analyze it and try to play with the information. Same thing for you as a dungeon master. Present information that may allow them to have some type of emotional reaction to what's being presented, because to me, that is one of the hallmarks of excellent storytelling. People remember how they feel, not whether or not they rolled something on an attack roll to fight the goblin in the third room in the dungeon. They remember the emotion and the feeling. So my name's Adam Scott for RPG Club. Please let me know how else I can help. If this helped you or helped, you feel like someone else will benefit, share it with them. We're trying to help as many people as possible. Drop your thoughts in the comment below. I'll see you next time. Thanks for being here.